This week on Business Access, Lisa Bell, Managing Director of Exim Bank, shares her story. Coming from humble beginnings with a strong upbringing in a Jamaican household, Bell recounts the influence her mother had, teaching her about the importance of sharing, being selfless, and leaving behind an impactful legacy. Lisa Bell is a force to be reckoned with in corporate Jamaica. She explains her sense of urgency with getting things done now and her appreciation for the public sector.
I'm impatient with the progress because I am very aware that external factors can change our fortunes very, very quickly. I realized that all of my preconceptions about what the public sector was were all completely unfounded. My name is Lisa Bell. I'm the Managing Director of the National Export-Import Bank of Jamaica. I was actually born in the United States, but lived all my life in Jamaica. I'm of Jamaican parentage. Grew up in a family of two, which became three much later on. A typical middle-class family in Jamaica. Grew up in Havendale at the time. I would say I had a very, very happy childhood, well-balanced. My parents were professionals. My father worked at Air Jamaica for many, many years. My mother was a career civil servant, so I had the balance of the both public and private. And very influential in my life, both were, in trying to chart a home that was filled with, yes, demands on academic excellence, but also at the same time teaching us how to be rounded individuals. So my church life was very important. I grew up as a Catholic, so that was very important to me. Went to Mona Prep, so that was also very important. So it was a nice balance between doing well but learning how to be a good person. I have a very close-knit family. My siblings unfortunately don't live here. My sister lives in Miami and my brother lives in Tampa. But we still see each other pretty often because my father still also lives in Florida. My mother is now deceased, but we still are pretty close and communicate pretty often. I had an older sister who was 3 years older than me, so she kind of charted the way and I followed her path. And for many, many years it was just the two of us. But a very funny story, and I'm sure my brother won't mind me telling you this, and it really impacted my life, which is why it's an important story. My mother was a civil servant and she worked for the child care services for many, many, many years, until her death, quite frankly. And part of her responsibilities as being deputy head of the child care division was to visit these children's homes all across the length and breadth of Jamaica. And one Christmas, I think I was in about second form at Immaculate, we were visiting a children's home. It would be a normal part of our routine to pick us up from school and we'd visit these children's home, participate in their Christmas parties. This particular year, we were visiting this children's home and a baby who was about a couple of months old had just been placed in the children's home. I'll never forget a girl, the Queen's Girls' School was actually helping out with the Christmas party. There was one particular girl who had this little baby in her arms, and my mother took the child from her, and she said to my mother, if you take this child home for Christmas, name him Christopher. Well, my mother took him home for Christmas. His name was Christopher, and he became my brother. And that story has impacted me, not only as an adult woman, her selflessness, and my parents' selflessness in taking a new child into our home, and how he's become the star of my family. Because he was much younger than my sister and I think 14 years separate us. But he really became the son my father never had, the brother we never had, and the son my mother never had. And that became my family. And I think that was my first lesson in understanding about giving back, giving, and how much more you get when you give. After graduating from Immaculate, I actually went for a little traumatic period. My mother died when I was about 15 years old. And on the surface, when I look back at it now, people always like, oh my God, your mother died at 15. How did you manage? How did you cope? But really looking back at it, I had so much family support and my father is like a rock, that I can't really look back and say it was difficult. I mean, beyond the normal grief that a child would feel when her mother passes. But my father really created a very stable household that allowed me to go ahead and do my A-levels, and then I went on to the University of Miami. That in and of itself was a new experience, leaving Jamaica, matriculating into a university setting, learning how to be different, learning how to be proud of my Jamaican roots and making that be a part of who I am. You know, it's so funny because people grow up in Jamaica and you don't really realize how important a brand you carry along with you just by virtue of being Jamaican. And understanding that, moving to the United States and understanding that being Jamaican was something to be very, very proud of. And it made you different, and it made you bold, and it made you positive about life. And so my first 4 years when I did an undergraduate degree in business, specializing, I guess, at that time in international finance and marketing, was a wonderful time. I remember my university years very, very proudly, participating in Jamaican organizations and Caribbean organizations and making our impact on campus, learning how to hone my craft in finance and doing internships at various different organizations, banks at the time in Miami, how to develop your skill and at the same time keeping the balance that made you a social creature also. I mean, I could not lie that my university years weren't as much hard as they were fun. So I finished my first degree, having gotten a scholarship to go to continue. I remember making the choice between staying in Miami or moving to Atlanta. Both schools, Emory University had also given me a graduate in assistantship. But I chose to stay in Miami and did my master's degree. I think it was, to be honest with you, a little instrumental because by that time I was in my 22, 23. And I had met what was to become the love of my life, my husband, who was at the University of Miami too. So I remained in Miami, did my master's degree in business, again specializing in finance, and ended up staying in Miami for a couple of years, getting married, and moving on to work with Anderson Consulting. Anderson Consulting doesn't exist anymore. But back then, it was a part of Arthur Anderson, which was the big 6 accounting firms. And I remember how proud of myself I was being recruited by Arthur Anderson. Stayed there for 2 years, learned a lot. And then the Jamaica bug kind of began to bite. I said, you know, husband and I are like, let's go home. Let's go back and make our contribution at home. So we packed up and decided to move back to Jamaica. I joke with people all the time and say that I'm an overworked, underpaid civil servant. I realized that all of my preconceptions about what the public sector was were all completely unfounded. So we packed up and decided to move back to Jamaica. So that was in about 1991, I think it was. And back then I remember thinking, I have a contribution to make, and why not make it at home? Why not use it to build my own homeland rather than staying in the United States? And not that it was a bad option, because many of my peers decided to stay, and I have lifelong friendships with people who I met during that period who live in the United States. But I decided to come back home, and it was a thrilling experience. Was recruited by Citizens Bank at that time and started my career as a career banker. Remember, I went into the corporate banking unit under a lady who is now deceased, Jasmine Chin, a giant of a banker. She was female and she was uncompromising, and she knew her craft and demanded everyone around her know their craft also. Excellent opening environment for a young, bright whippersnapper. Thought that she knew everything about the world, everything about finance. Jasmine Chin was just that kind of woman who told you exactly what you needed to know and how you needed to present yourself. So I stayed at Citizens Bank for a couple of years and then was recruited by the Victoria Mutual Group and went on to be the deputy head of Victoria Mutual Investments Limited, a small subsidiary of Victoria Mutual which handled a lot of their commercial loan portfolio. The Building Society was really focused on residential mortgages, but wanted a subsidiary that would focus on commercial banking. So I worked in that unit, went on to be the head of that unit, small subsidiary, and worked in the commercial banking arena. It's something I'm particularly proud of because it was my first true management leadership role. I was responsible for running the organization. Not only my finance skills were important, but all my general management skills needed to be developed. And that was an excellent experience in terms of learning from the then board of Victoria Mutual, who shared responsibility for the subsidiary, about how to lead an organization, how to understand the nuances of every single function within the organization, so you would be apt to identify possible errors, things that didn't look right. And I think I learned how important that was. I made a couple of mistakes myself, but those mistakes, and people say, people talk about their careers all the time and say, they've always been good at what they did. And the fact is that my mistakes, small though they may be, were excellent teaching opportunities for me going forward. And I actually, looking back now, thank God for some of those little mistakes that I made, because they just told me how sharp I needed to be and where my areas of weakness were. So Victoria Mutual was a very good learning experience for me. I joined Wmba as the head of manager of investments, and that brought me into a whole new arena, a new international arena, how to look at marketing business opportunities in an international arena, what it was like to attract investment into your country, how to analyze an investment and determine whether it was going to yield the benefits that the country was looking for, whether it was in job creation or investment. Wmba was a whole new ballgame, but no doubt as important in the development of my career. I had to represent the country in many different places across the world. So it did accord me the opportunity to travel, but in those traveling experiences, to learn what it is like to represent your country on an international stage. Moving from the private sector to the public sector, I had my own preconceptions about what the public sector was like. You kind of buy into this perception that, public sector workers are not as hardworking, and, do I want to join the public sector? I did have apprehensions in that regard, but having gone in, I think I joined Wmba at a time when they were doing a lot of re-engineering and transforming the organization. In fact, I came in as a part of a management team of maybe 6 or 7 new managers, and under the leadership of Pat Francis, it was just as hard as working in the private sector. In fact, we worked harder because we had less resources to utilize, and you learned how to multitask very, very, very quickly. And I realized that all of my preconceptions about what the public sector was were all completely unfounded. We were driven to work hard and to achieve excellence in what we did. And that period allowed me to lay the foundation. I went from a managerial position to an executive director, and ultimately acted as deputy president for a two-year period before I left. It was no easy road. It was hard work, and understanding how to work with less resources was also very, very important. And I will tell you that those of us who believe that public sector workers are less than, I am here to tell you that that is really not the case. There are very fine people in the public sector who are well educated, who work very hard despite not being compensated as they should, or having the resources that they would have in the private sector. I mean, I joke with people all the time and say that I'm an overworked, underpaid civil servant. But it is the truth. There are many people in the public sector who work very hard despite all of the challenges that are presented, and deliver world-class service to the government. Actually, I was recruited from JAMPRO to join my current position, which is the National Export-Import Bank of Jamaica, commonly known as EXIM. And I think my work on the export side, export development and export promotion side within JAMPRO, was a good foundation to move to EXIM, as well as my finance background, because EXIM is really a banking institution, a development finance institution that's owned by the government. But really and truly, it operates at the same commercial banking standards that exist in the market today. I've been at EXIM since 2010 as a managing director, and I would, after 6 years, say that it has been a very interesting experience. EXIM is over 30 years old this year, so has a rich tradition of providing financial services to the private sector. Many of the large companies that you see in Jamaica today, at some time or the other, interfaced with EXIM. One of the misnomers about EXIM is that people assume that we only do lending to exporters. But the fact is that a long time ago, we decided to take a value chain approach. You really can't expect to have great impact on exports unless you're looking at those companies who provide goods and services to support the export sector. And so we decided to take a more aggressive approach by financing not only exporters but the entire value chain. In fact, many productive enterprises, and even more so to focus on the small and medium-sized sector. Why I think that has become very important in recent times is, as you may know, in most developing countries, the SME sector is the driver of the economy. They are incredibly important in catalyzing an economy, and that is because they are important in creating new jobs, in driving innovation, in creating new opportunity, in impacting exports in a way large business cannot. So as a part of the government mandate to stimulate this sector, EXIM focuses on SMEs and how we can improve their ability to earn revenues, to export foreign exchange earnings, to create jobs, to drive innovation. And that has been our hallmark for the last 25, 30 years. I'm impatient with the progress, I must say, because I am very aware that external factors can change our fortunes very, very quickly. So if we agree that the SME sector is really important in catalyzing an economy and a developing economy like ours, we really need to pay closer attention. And I think my board, particularly my current chairman, Gary Hendrickson, is such an advocate for the role of SMEs in the Jamaican economy, as you know. And I think we share the point of view that if we are really to have impact, we have to really empower this sector to move. Access to finance, access to appropriate finance is very important in allowing SMEs to grow. And that's a well-established international fact. So we continue to fight to create the opportunities to deliver appropriate finance, even where the traditional financial institutions are not stepping up to bat. I mention this statistic often. The credit to GDP ratio, which is a measure that is used internationally, which really marks how a SME sector, how an economy is providing finance to this sector, is 29% in Jamaica. It's the lowest in the region. By comparison, if you look at the United States, it's 130%. We have a long way to go. And I think what continues to be my challenge, probably my personal challenge, is to ensure that we continue to have the impact and to provide finance, because it's only so doing are we going to get the benefits that we want. And I think I have an excellent board and minister who continue to push in that regard. But much more needs to be done, and much more has to be done. I think a more holistic approach needs to be taken to the SME sector. I think we talk about it a lot, but there is, and don't get me wrong, there are initiatives that are underway to intervene in various different areas. I'm impatient with the progress, I must say, because I am very aware that external factors can change our fortunes very, very quickly. Jamaica has achieved a significant degree of success in terms of stabilizing its macroeconomic environment. However, we know one hurricane, one change in oil prices, one international event can affect us very, very quickly. So I say all the time, we need to make hay while the sun shines. We need to retool our SMEs. We need to build their skill base. We need to provide more information to them on how to access new markets. And most importantly, we need to provide them with the finance they need and mechanisms for failure, for success and for failure. Now, the Bankruptcy Act and certain other legislative initiatives are being put in place. But as I said, I'm impatient, and I would love if I could close my eyes and wave a magic wand. I would have EXIM have more funding to be able to create new programs that will impact SMEs in a major way. Since the beginning of my tenure in 2010, I would think that we have made good success. As a bank, we're always impacted by our ability to lend. You have to have money to lend money. But despite some of the challenges we have faced in terms of not necessarily being appropriately capitalized, we have had seen lending up to $8.5 billion to the private sector. 90%, I think 97% of our loans to date in this financial year have been to small and medium enterprises. We've had interventions in terms of workshops through our Business Advisory Service Unit, which are addressing some of the other issues that SMEs face. We're working alongside the Ministry of Tourism to craft specific products that will help the growth of that sector, and continue to negotiate significant deals and programs that will continue to help. As I said, I think we've done a good job, but I think there's more to be done. And I am very hopeful that with some of the efforts we're making now, that we'll be able to achieve even more this year and into the future. As I said before, I'm very impatient about progress. Based on my interaction with some of my stakeholders on a day-to-day basis, I'm impatient for them to be able to achieve the success that I believe they can achieve. So my vision, if I close my eyes and led by a very strong and powerful board who push me, it is really to see a Jamaica where we have a vibrant business sector, and that there are companies growing and creating new opportunities, because I believe if you create those opportunities, they will grow. Actually, I know that for sure, because I've seen it happen over the last couple of years. So from a personal standpoint, when you get to a certain age, you start thinking about, have you achieved enough? What are you doing with your life? Are you leaving a legacy? And maybe I'm at the point that I'm starting to think about those things. One of my experiences that remain, I guess, vivid in my mind is, as I said, I remember I told you a little earlier that my mother had died when I was 15. Anyway, when I returned to Jamaica, I think I was still at Citizens Bank at the time, and I remember getting a phone call, and they said, "Are you Lisa White?" And Lisa Bell, formerly Lisa White, and I said yes. They said they were calling from the Ministry of whatever, Child Care Services. They were having an award ceremony, and they wanted to give my mother an award posthumously, and would I come and accept it? At that time, my mother had been dead for 25 years. And I said to myself, I went and received the award, but remember being humbled at the fact that somebody would remember something you had done 25 years ago and sought to acknowledge it. And I think that has stayed with me from the standpoint, what am I doing with my life that 25 years from now or after my death that somebody would remember it? And that kind of has challenged me in the last few years to make sure that outside of my professional success, that personally that I am achieving success in other areas, in providing balance, providing a stable household for my children. I have two beautiful girls who are a blessing beyond compare. I would have to say I have a wonderful husband, so I have a good family. And am I investing in them as much as I've invested in my career? Keeping that balance as a woman and making sure that I have done my part in that regard. I'm always tell people you can fail at a job, but you really can't fail at your children. And even though we've been involved in a number of charitable events throughout the years, I do feel this pull to try and make greater impact, make greater sacrifice, to leave a mark that is meaningful beyond my professional success. People think I'm a goody two-shoes. I think my professional image that I project is one of a very serious kind of no-nonsense kind of woman. And that's true to some extent, but there is a much lighter side of me also. When people see that other side, they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, really? But I've learned over the years not even to worry about it. I do maintain a kind of professional kind of stance when I'm at work, but at home I'm just another mother. When I'm out, I'm just another girl having a good time. So I didn't realize that for a long time, but people kind of said that. Wealth has meant different things to me at different points in my life. When you're young, wealth means that you have a whole heap of money. But as I've gotten older, I realize that wealth really means much, much more, much more. Wealth means happiness, balance, because money can't buy good health necessarily, or doesn't guarantee good health. Money doesn't buy peace of mind. And for me now, at this stage in my life, wealth means being able to achieve success and balance in all areas of your life.